Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Rogue Agent Answers. My name is the Rogue Agent. Some people call me David Lewis, and every week I answer one of the many life insurance related questions that I've received from clients, from email subscribers on the daily email list, questions floated to me from across the interwebs, in the comments sections, which I know you're not supposed to read, or just interactions that I've had with people in real life over the past 20 years, which is a long time. And some of these questions I just scribbled down on scrap pieces of paper. Some of these are stuff I've written down on my phone. Some of it is on Post-it notes scattered all over the office. And every week I answer one of those questions. So if you'd like to ask your question, drop them in the comments section or join my email list for more life insurance tips and advice at monogenics.com. MONEGENIX.com. And now for this week's question. How soon after I pay my premium can I borrow against my policy? Always in a rush to get at that money, like it's burning a hole in our pockets or something. The short answer is as soon as the insurer cashes the check and applies the money. So usually if it's a few days, I tested it out when the very first life insurance policy I bought, I tested it out on my own policy, and within 2 days, just to see if I could do it, I wanted to see what was possible. With that said, I don't recommend putting money in and then taking it right back out again. First of all, remember what you're buying. Okay, it's life insurance. Your life insurance policy is not merely a product. It's not. I know the infinite banking guys are going to be like, "It's a bank." It's not a bank. It's a bank. It's not a bank. It's not just a product though. It's not transactional. It's not a highly transactional product like a checking or savings account. It's an extension of the life insurance company. They're selling you a contract. Okay? That's why you get a share of the company's profits every year, but you're not getting like a bank account or a checking account or an investment account. You're getting a contract. You're getting a promise, a future payment of benefits. And the company is sharing if it's a participating whole life policy, they're going to share in the performance of the company with you. Running your policy hard like that, like if you're borrowing from the policy right away after you buy it, running it hard like that puts an additional stress on the life insurance company. If every policyholder did that, it would put a lot of financial stress on them, which people are like, well, I don't care. But you do, because it's your company. When you buy a whole life policy, you become part owner in the company. So you're basically stressing your own company out and creating hardship in your own company. So you're kind of screwing yourself along with everybody else. So now if let's say 5% of all policyholders start doing this, it's not really going to matter. That's not going to hurt the company, right? But if half of all policyholders at the company start doing this, that might make a little bit of difference, make the executives a little nervous, start putting some financial strain on the insurance company. They're going to have to start rearranging how they're doing their investments to create more liquidity. That's going to take away from some of the long-term stuff they're doing, which then drags down the returns. Yes, it will it will pull down the returns, because they have to start making more short-term decisions, because policyholders are, at the end of the day, policyholders are driving the company. So if policyholders signal that they, en masse, right? If policyholders start signaling that they want a highly transactional company, then the company, it's not a bank, but the company will start making more like bank-like decisions, right? They're going to start turning over investments faster. They're going to start having so much liquidity that they're not going to be able to generate higher returns. Part of the reason that you're able to get high returns, as high return as you can out of a whole life policy, is because the insurance company is allocating some of its money to longer term investments. Yes, they have high liquidity. So I don't want you to think that it's not a liquid asset. So insurance companies they keep a lot set aside for redemption purposes, for cash loans and stuff like that. They know people do that. But they don't expect, half or 3/4 of their policy holders to start taking loans all at once. That would create some problems for the carrier. So, and it would force them to start triggering liquidity controls, similar to what I mentioned in last week's podcast about the 6-month holding rule. And that would be if it was like basically a run on the insurance company. If somebody's like, we're going to go and we're going to start draining the insurance company out, then there's going to be a problem. So I know everyone's perspective on this is that they're just going to say, well, it's just me doing this, and they're not thinking about the fact that everyone else is thinking the same thing. This is the tragedy of the commons. Everybody's always only thinking about what they're doing, and they're not thinking how their actions are impacting other people. And it's a very sort of short range kind of, I think the word for it is solipsism. They're only concerned with themselves and not concerned with, I wouldn't even say it's self-interest, because doesn't even go that far to being self-interested, because they're part of a pool of insureds, and they're all supposed to be working together. It's like teamwork, right? You go into it knowing that, right? And so yes, you want to get benefits out of it. Of course you do. You want to benefit from the thing that you're doing, but you don't want to engineer it in such a way where you're doing things that are ultimately going to harm yourself along with everybody else that's in the pool. That's stupid, because it ultimately comes back to you, and you end up kind of blowing up your own company. So most policyholders thankfully they're not like that, and insurance companies are pretty good about managing those kinds of risks. So, but anyway, there are people out there who do think that way. They're like, well, it's just me, blah, blah. And it's not a problem until it is. Okay, so this is why I do not advocate clients redline their policy with policy loans. It's just not a good idea. If you need the money, I'm not saying that if you need money from your policy that you should be hesitant to go for it. You shouldn't. You should take loans when you need them. If you end up taking a lot of loans from your company, that's fine too. It's just that you don't want to walk into with a mindset that you're going to put money in and then immediately take it back out again. That's the wrong mindset. This is not a checking account. So I think that there's some good things that have come from the IBC world and from people teaching how to do this infinite banking thing. But one of the things that I've always had a problem with is this idea that you should be putting money in and then immediately taking money right back out again, and say like, oh, I'm going to put $50,000 into a policy, and then I'm going to take $40,000 back out. Like I said, by all means, if you need money, take a policy loan from your insurance company. Anyway, second reason I don't recommend immediately taking a policy loan after paying your premium is because you shouldn't have to be doing that. Okay, if you have to take policy loans immediately after paying a premium, you're overburdened with premium payments or just other expenses, right? And really probably should scale things back a bit in your budget. It means, but like budget-wise, if you have to start taking loans right away, you're probably taking on too much. Now, if it's a big expense and it's just something comes up, you start putting money in, and then like 2-3 years later, you're like, oh, I need to borrow it for something. It's a major expense that I need. Fine. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about people who go in and, like I said, they go in, they put money in, they immediately take it back out because they do it like, well, I'm going to finance my monthly expenses, or I'm going to start putting, it sounds crazy, but I've heard and seen IBC practitioners. Maybe they're at the fringe or whatever. But the point is, I've heard this recommendation before. It's if you're, everything, you should finance everything with your policy. Christmas gifts and Christmas parties and vacations and all, just every little thing, groceries, everything they want you to be financing with. And it's just, you're getting carried away with it, with this idea. If you're saving between 10 and 25% of your income into a whole life policy, then and you're still finding it difficult, right, to save. And then the problem is probably that your expenses are a bit too high in your life. But there's a higher probability that of your income being too low, and so you need to focus on increasing your income. But if you can't comfortably save at least 10% of your income, your expenses are way too high for the amount of income that you're making. So if you're saving less than 10% of your income, into a life insurance policy, then, I'd also argue that your expenses are too high, right? And then you need to make cuts, or your income is too low and you need to make more money. A lot of times, it's the former. When your expenses are too high, you're just not able to save enough money, and you're going to end up borrowing more money against your policy when you do need money. A lot of people but a lot of people do find that they're just not making enough money. So again, you should be able to, if you're in a financially healthy place, and I get it. I know a lot of people are not in a financially healthy place. A lot of people are financially struggling. I'm not blind to that fact. There's, the average incomes are not that great in America right now. A lot of people are struggling financially right now. I get that. A lot of people are. A lot of people are finding it really, really hard to make money. But this also points to another fact, that if you are financially comfortable, if you're in a financially good spot, okay, let's put it that way, you should be able to save 25% of your income. Should not be a problem. It should not feel difficult for you to do that. If it does feel difficult, 10% of your income should not feel difficult. If it does, you've got a problem. 25% of your income should feel like a lot, but it shouldn't feel like it's hurting you, like it's a real struggle to do it. That's how you're doing well, financially speaking. You should be able to do that. And I've had savings rate, I've been all over the map. Just depends on the current, what my wife and I are doing at that particular time. But I've saved as little as 10% up to 50, slightly over 50. I would say 50, round down, but 50% of our income. And everywhere in between. So I know what's possible. I know that an extremely high savings rate is possible. You can save a lot of your income. But I would say somewhere between 10 and 25%. You should be able to do that and do it somewhat comfortably. 10% definitely. 25% would be great. If everybody was saving 25%, you'd have a lot less trouble, a lot fewer problems in the United States, I think. Either way, you should never be forced to redline your policy except in extreme emergency situations. If you need to take a loan, it should never be a situation where you're basically having to drain the thing out right down, take everything right down to the felt, as they say in poker. You should never have to use all your chips. Okay, you should almost never have to go all in, so to speak. You should be taking loans that are like a percentage of, and probably, honestly, in most circumstances, I wouldn't go more than maybe 40%, of your total cash surrender value. If you have to go over that, you got to think about what kind of dire financial straits you're in that you're having to borrow that much money. It's not that it's not available to you. It's not that, it's there for that purpose for if you need it, right? But if you have to go over that kind of into the higher 50, 60% higher than that on how much cash value you're borrowing, it's time to think about what's going on. Is it one of those once in a lifetime opportunities where you're making money? If it's for an expense, for a consumable expense, probably not a great idea. You're probably making a mistake. So anyway, that's my kind of thoughts, personal, professional, whatever thoughts on borrowing money against a life insurance policy and when it makes sense to do so. My own personal opinion about this, and other people can have other opinions about it, but that's the way I see it. Anyway, I hope that helps, and I will see you next week with another one of these great questions. I love these questions.
Okay, that's it for this week's question. If you'd like to add your question to the list, just drop them in the comment section or send me an email. And if you want more life insurance tips and advice, just head on over to monogenics.com, monegeniix.com, and sign up for my daily email list.